It is rare that we here at Downloadable Content get any sort of comments, so when we do, it's a nice treat, and very good to know that at least one person out there on the wide world of the internet is actually listening. It's even better when someone sends a request for an episode, so to honor that request, this episode will be devoted to some of the people behind indie game developer Kisareth Studios. Now with the first 2 games out on Steam, we'll take a closer look at Chronicles of a Dark Lord, how Kisareth came to be, and what their plans are heading into the future. And so to YouTube user GamerEternal777, this episode is for you, so hope you listen in. Kisareth Studios, next on Downloadable Content. Everyone, and welcome to Downloadable Content. I'm Brian, and with me we have Ron.
Hey everyone.
We have Tanya.
Hello.
And we welcome 2 newcomers to Downloadable Content. We have John.
Hello.
And we have Ryan.
Hello.
Welcome one and all, and thank you guys from Kisareth for coming on to do this episode, our fan request episode. This is actually only the second time we've ever done a fan request episode, so it just goes to show you that in the 5 years we've been doing Downloadable Content, 2 people have suggested ideas for episodes. So this episode is devoted, as I mentioned in the intro, entirely to Kisareth Studios. So to the YouTube user, GamerEternal777, I hope you enjoy it, and I hope all of your questions get answered. So, before we get started, let me just do the usual plugs. All episodes of Downloadable Content can be found on iTunes, YouTube, and Stitcher, and you could get a hold of us in a variety of ways. You can go out to facebook.com/dlcontent, find us on Twitter at dlcontent, on Tumblr, dlcpodcast.tumblr.com, and of course you can always email us at dlcontent1@gmail.com. So there you go, all of the different ways to get downloadable content into your ears. Just be sure you use enough Q-tips. And so with that said, before I dive into some of the questions I have prepared, why don't you guys go about introducing yourselves and just give a little description about what you do? So, Tanya, we'll start with you.
Well, hello. I've actually been on DLC before, so I'm kind of an old pro at this, quote unquote. But no, my name is Tanya Botelho. I am the CEO of Kisareth Studios.
Hi, I'm John Sierra. I'm president of Kisareth Studios.
Hello, I'm Ryan Hallisey. I am assistant programmer and a 3D asset creator at Kisareth Studios.
Excellent. And for full disclosure out there, even though I've mentioned it before on the internet and on previous episodes of Downloadable Content, I do beta testing for Kisareth. I've beta tested some of their games already, and I've had a blast doing so, and will continue to do so. But you already knew that. So
Ryan's in our dev room.
Not quite. Not quite. That's a bit of a drive.
No, I mean in the games. You're in the dev room in the games.
Oh, in the games. Yes. I'm very. It's like one of the things off, a gamer's bucket list. Apparently, it's a check mark. Actually be an NPC. All right. So with that, I'm going to dive into some of the questions I've got written up for all of y'all. So the first one, the basic one, how did Kisareth happen? How did it come to be?
That's a Tanya question.
Yes, that's a me question. Actually, it started a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away.
Oh, Jesus.
No, but seriously, it started actually as online role play on under AOL back in the old days when it was all text based. And
56K modems and dial-up noises,
oh
beeps.
yeah, 56K modems, baby.
Oh,
Um, but where all you hear is going online. But you know,
I'm just Brian could pull up a sound clip for the kids who don't know what
right?
they're talking about.
They still have that today. They call
Yeah,
it
they
dubstep.
do. Yeah, they do. So basically, how it started was, like I said, actually started about 2 decades ago. I was, I had just gotten into AOL online role play, text based, and I was going into chats, and I was, bringing my character, who was Magus Draken Lee, into these chats and killing everybody in sight, because he's a Dark Lord. And I didn't think much of it at the time, but over the course of literally 20 years of role play, he morphed from being this just, one dimensional character into a multifaceted, really in depth character with a ton of story and background behind him. He became the consummate, character where he evolved, you know, completely, from where he used to be. I've had him for a long, long time, and of course, now that he's in the games, I have him for the rest of time. He's going to be there. He's going to be out there. Um, the stories themselves, actually, especially the ones in the games, are based on what was done on the RP. So, so we grab a lot of the basis for the stories in the games from the RP, but you don't actually see, like, event for event happen in the games the way it happened in the RP for obvious reasons. I mean, at some points we had, you know, 400 people involved in some of these storylines, and yeah, it was just a lot to get into. As for Kisareth itself, the company, well, once I had retired, quote unquote, retired from AOLRP, I didn't want the stories that we told to be lost in the flotsam of the internet, especially the old internet, as it's now called. So I didn't want all that story to go to waste. I didn't want the character of Magus Lee to go to waste. He needed to live in a different medium. Because everything was winding down, especially after all that time. The chats weren't nearly as frequent, and Facebook was coming out. MySpace at that point was coming out and everything. And it's just, the AOL chats were becoming obsolete, or even, by the time 2005 hit, they were obsolete. But anyway, so, basically I said to myself, I gotta figure out some way to do this. So I thought, why not do the video game? Why not do a video game on it? I chose that medium because it's both. I mean, I could have done a novel, and that would have been one thing, but I figure I'm not really a novel type writer. Writing a video game is a different animal than writing a novel. And, having been a huge fan of classic RPGs in the past, I figured, why not? So I took a stab at it. I got an EIN number for Kisareth Studios, and then I went, all right, let's get the company registered and let's do this. I called it Kisareth Studios after the Kisareth Empire, which was, again on AOL RP. It was part of that story for what, 15 years, something like that. So yeah, and that's how the company began. It began as a rebirth of the AOL RP, just in a different medium. And the first draft of the game that came out was atrocious. I'll be honest, it was atrocious, especially by the standards we have now. It was atrocious, but it had some good merits to it, which I think, propelled the company going forward. I started bringing on more people, especially people who do art, because especially at that point, I had no clue about art. So, lo and behold, as I started bringing more and more people on to do different aspects of game development, it just the company started really starting to gain ground and gain traction, and as we added to the game and as we enhanced it and came up with an enhanced edition and that type of thing for the first game, uh, you know especially when we brought on John, who I'm kind of segueing into that. When we brought on John,
Oh boy.
when we brought on him, I was like, well, come on board, you can do art, because I like what he did for us. And yeah, he became our consummate artist at that point in time. And I mean, graphics are always going to be in his blood, no matter what position he's in. It's just how it's going to be. But yeah, it really did. I mean, like the transition from from hobby to actual game developer, it was quite a transition. And I lost, and again, it's not all cup of tea or anything like that. It's not all peaches and cream. I lost friends. I've had team members who've lost friends, because I took my craft seriously. I didn't think of it as a hobby, and I wanted to do this for my career, for my life. And I didn't go to college for this either. I didn't go to college for game design. I didn't have what you would consider credentials for game design, but I mean, I knew the business aspect of things because that's what I was trained in, but I didn't know actual game design until I got into it. I didn't even know Ruby coding until I had it in front of me and I started really learning it. So that's pretty much how it all came about. I mean, it started with me and went from there.
Now, John, were you part of this, the initial AOL role-playing group? So.
No, not at all. I was actually contacted by Tanya over YouTube because I was doing the Let's Plays and the request videos and stuff like that. And she was trying to reach out to people on YouTube because free publicity, So I got this long note from Tanya about how she liked my videos and here's a free copy of the game and blah, 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 blip, blip, blip. And I was in a hurry and I kind of filed it away somewhere and then I misplaced it and came across it something like 3 months later. And then I contacted her and lo and behold, she was still around. So I downloaded the game and I did a video on it, and then I get this email from Tanya later on that we enjoyed it, even though I did make fun of the game for the most part, because that's what I did on YouTube. And I found it interesting, even though, the first version of episode 1 wasn't all that well put together. It was also rather impressive when you consider it was basically just Tanya working on it. I mean, she had James there as an editor and Richie as a mapper, but there weren't really that many people involved in it. So I found the story interesting, though. That was the main thing, is that I was attracted to the way that the game took all these tropes that we know and subverted them and was very aware of them. So as I played through it, I remained in contact with Tanya and whatnot, and I remember that I reported a few bugs, and I was looking into them because I wanted to see exactly how legitimate is this company, and I was Googling, and I went around and I found out that they sold physical copies of the game, which we don't actually do that anymore because it costs too much. But back then, it was a thing you could get. I think it was for $10. You can get a physical copy of the first game. And I saw the box that they were sending it. The artwork on the box was ridiculous. It was it was 15 different fonts and really low resolution and poor choice of colors. And
so most websites of the 90s then.
Talking Brian, to be honest with you, like 1995 websites. Okay.
So your Netscape 3s of the world.
Yeah. Like right around when websites first started to have images, like I'm looking for like the glowy matrix skull that spins around, So anyway, I thought to myself, I could do better than that, and I'm not even an artist. So I had Photoshop, which I had honestly gotten just to make like cat memes, And I said, I have this expensive program. Why not use it for something? And I wound up, as a joke, purely as a lark, making this cover art for them. And I posted it on their Facebook page. And I got these replies, and Tanya contacted me saying they actually wanted to use it, which was somewhat of a surprise because I didn't even think it was, like that good. But it wound up getting remade and whatnot. And then I got invited to one of the conferences, and I started making comments on the business aspect on it. And that's how I kind of came into it.
And the rest is history. Ryan, what about you? How'd you wind up working for Kisareth?
By actually coincidence, Tanya happened to run into a friend of mine at Rite Aid, and somehow they got into a conversation about how Tanya was looking for programmers, and my friend knew that I did programming. She didn't know exactly what I did for programming, but she knew that I did it. And so she came to me and told me about the interaction and offered to get me the number as soon as she could. And I think she spent about 3 weeks forgetting to give me the number, and eventually she gave it to me, and I contacted Tanya, and I just jumped at the chance to join a game studio because I've been looking forward to that. I'd been looking forward to that for a while beforehand, because that's what I had planned to do for the rest of my life since my sophomore year in high school.
Cool. Excellent. And I was introduced to you guys by way of Kat.
Yeah.
Yes, by way of Kat. She was talking to me about
meow.
What?
Meow meow meow.
Meow meow. Talking about this really cool game called Chronicles of a Dark Lord Episode 1, which was done in the style of, Super Nintendo, JRPG, sort of in, Final Fantasy 4 or 6-ish. And I'm like, well, I'm intrigued, because I love those types of games. And she sent me a copy of the first game. And I played it, and the English grammar pedant in me was screaming, but I enjoyed the game immensely. And it was actually Tanya, her first episode of downloadable content was the episode in which we talked about LGBT gamers. And that was my introduction to Tanya, and from there, I was asked to beta test the Nightmare edition of Episode 1. And then I became an official beta tester. And since then, it's been fun. It's been a lot of fun.
Yeah, the DLC portion, what you just referred to, the Nightmare Vision DLC portion for Episode 1, that was not written by me, everybody. That was written by John, actually.
True, yeah.
Actually, and just as a little aside here, I'm really glad that John was able to get his writing out there, because it's been received quite positively by pretty much everybody that plays through that portion of the game. And that's why, of course, I'm giving more and more writing tasks to John for future games, which we will undoubtedly go over in this podcast. But yeah, it was definitely a springboard for me to see how John's writing actually is in the game, and he fits the mold perfectly. He really is a tremendous game writer. I'd actually say, and I mean this too, that some people love my writing, and some people say it's good, Tanya. Me, I always say I surround myself with people who are better at their jobs than I am, and people who are smarter than me. So, John, I think, is a better writer than I am personally. I've grown by leaps and bounds, of course, but I think John's a better writer, just as what that is. And that's why I can't
speaking as the person who Tanya is talking up, I want to say that I am a fan of Tanya's writing.
Thank you, John. Thank you. But no, for me, I'm a fan. I'm a big fan of John's writing. I'm also a fan, actually, of April's writing, which we'll get into in a little bit, I think. But yeah, I'm a huge fan of April.
The podcast is young.
Yes.
The podcast is young. So, well, cool. I will move on then. So, what made you decide, and again, any one of you can jump in, what made you decide the design choice for Chronicles of a Dark Lord? Why did you ultimately decide on that sort of 16-bit Super Nintendo design? I mean, obviously, we're in an age now of indie games really taking advantage of the retro revival, as it's been called. So what ultimately made you guys decide on that era of game?
I think I can answer that pretty succinctly, Ryan. Especially for people who are our age, me and Tanya, we grew up playing these games, and we have a lot of fond memories. And the thing is, there was never really an evolution of the JRPG. There are modern JRPGs, but they become very divisive. Look at games like the recent Final Fantasies and how they've changed from the formula so drastically that they become revolutionary instead of evolutionary. And Episode 1, in our way, was our tribute to those games that we played growing up. You've noticed it's a lot like Final Fantasy IV. There's other games. There's other games in there. There's Lufia, there's Lunar, there's Breath of Fire, there's Phantasy Star. But it is definitely our tribute to those games. And then Episode 2 is saying, what if we took that aesthetic and evolved it, and instead of worrying about how to keep up with the technology, because that was the problem. When everything went 3D, everybody had to say, we got to keep up with the technology, we got to have a bullet point of features, and they didn't necessarily stay true to the genre. So what you're going to see in the series as it goes on is that it's always going to remain rooted in that era, but it's going to basically say, like, what if that era, the 90s, was not just a period of 10 years? What if it kept going and evolved naturally rather than, that shock to the system of going from Final Fantasy VI to Final Fantasy VII, which seemed great at the time, but now you look at it and it's basically Lego Final Fantasy with a really bad translation. So, like Episode 2 was our way of saying, yeah, we have these aspects of, like, Dragon Quest IV is heavily influenced that one, and Final Fantasy VI somewhat influenced it, but also we're trying to do new things with that old style without necessarily going completely bonkers and making it like an action game or making it like a fighting game or making it something that it's not. We want the JRPGs to stay JRPGs.
So, from what I get from that was basically you're trying to say there's still room to explore with the 16-bit format.
Oh, yeah. Like, I get into these discussions with people that they talk about things like turn-based battles or random encounters, and they say, well, that's a relic of the past, and it should stay in the past. And I say, well, I think it could be utilized in a different way because we can take those things and evolve them. The turn-based system, the ATB system, these things were invented and they were very great at the time, and then people came up with other things, but nobody ever evolved these things. They just eventually abandoned them or moved on to something completely different. And like one thing that you're going to see in Episode 3 is you're going to see a completely different battle system that's never been done before, but it's going to feel familiar to people. They're going to grasp it and they're going to understand it almost right away.
I kind of like that. It sort of speaks to me as an artist and a photographer. I still shoot a lot of black and white 35mm film, when I've had professors and colleagues and other artists say, "Why are you still shooting film? We're on digital. Just move on already." And my reply is usually, "No, I don't think so. There's still a lot of things that I want to do with the medium."
Have you ever read The Fountainhead, Brian?
That's an Ayn Rand story, right?
Yeah.
I have never read that. However, I'm currently slogging my way through Atlas Shrugged.
Oh, you should have read The Fountainhead first. But
But no,
it had a lot to do with architecture. That's another art. It's a practical art. Video games are a practical art. What's done in one medium shouldn't be done in another medium. Each medium should speak to itself. You shouldn't grab a digital camera and then take the same pictures that you're taking with film. It should be used for things that film can't do.
Right.
And likewise, film should be doing things that digital can't do. So I understand. I actually understand what you're saying when you say, like, because you want to stick with that and do the digital, why completely abandon a medium just because there's something new and shiny?
Mm-hmm. And I certainly understand that with video games. I mean, you mentioned Final Fantasy. That's a great example of how, with the new consoles, how much more divisive that franchise has become. Between older gamers who grew up with Final Fantasy 1 through 6 and ones who are coming into the series with the more recent games.
May I just interject real quick?
Yeah.
Just real quick. I just want to put this out there so it's out there. Okay, Final Fantasy VII HD Remake. All I gotta say is this. If they don't keep some semblance of the ATV battle system, whether it's enhanced or whatever the case may be, they don't keep some semblance of it, I will be one pissed off Tanya Lee Botelho. That's all I'm saying.
And we and Tanya had this discussion. Like, Final Fantasy 15 has a very action-based system. It's like Kingdom Hearts, and I like the idea of doing that, but if they gave that to Final Fantasy 7, it would be like giving a handgun to a toddler. It doesn't make sense.
So, steering us back a little bit, but that'll happen. We go off tangent a lot.
Yeah, and just to mention, also the business aspect of what we do is really important, because there is what Tanya likes to call an indie golden age going on right now, and there are people who want to relive the past, but not necessarily relive the past. We want to give them games that are like the games they played, but without all the inherent frustrations of that time that we all just sort of dealt with because we didn't have anything better.
Oh, there is obviously, with all of the retro style games that are on Steam, there is obviously a very clear market for these types of games. You want to keep. I'm noticing that people want to have these retro style games, but also have fresh takes on them.
Yeah, and they don't want to necessarily, just taking it as an action game. DuckTales Remastered came out a couple of years ago, and I enjoyed it. But one thing that they did is they were like, okay, they went back to the old NES aesthetic of 3 lives, game over, and you got to start from the beginning. And that could be very frustrating for modern gamers just because they're used to the convenience, but at least they had saves.
Yes.
Because if they didn't, then it really would have been just the same exact game with pretty graphics. And people are not looking for a Super Nintendo game with better graphics. They're looking for a Super Nintendo game with evolved gameplay.
Yes. Which is that reminds me of, like, on platformers, like games like Battle Block Theater or Shovel Knight, if we want to go.
Shovel Knight was fantastic.
Or if Shovel Knight had kept that whole NES thing of 3 lives, I would have broken my monitor.
Yeah, we put up with that when we were kids because that's what we had.
Yeah, we don't have to anymore.
Yeah.
So. Still keeping with that idea of the visuals, and let's see if we can drag Ryan in here. This is something I have personally experienced. I have tried to show friends Chronicles of a Dark Lord but because the games, both episode 1 and 2, have been made with RPG Maker, some of my friends kind of act a little bit snobbish, a little bit purist, like, oh, this game is made with RPG Maker, I shouldn't really take this seriously, or it's not a quote-unquote real game. So how do you handle criticism like that, if you've gotten it at all?
We've gotten it.
Oh,
Let them have that attitude and then play the game and be sort of transformed in that way.
Ryan, what do you say about that?
Yeah,
It's very easy to go in and not take it seriously, and it's all about the story, though, because that's what initially brought me in.
Brian, a lot of what you just kind of said sounded like quotes from my friends. Like I told people, like when I got hired, I told people, guys, I work for Kisareth Studios, go check out their games, and all I heard from their like retorts were, oh, Final Fantasy reskins, I don't want to play another pixel RPG game, and they didn't even give it a chance. Which to me kind of stung a little bit, because I'm like, guys, support me, but their choices are their choices. I'm not going to force them to play the game. I just know they're missing out, so it's kind of their loss.
Ryan, it sounds like those particular people are not really our demographic anyway.
No, they're not.
Something I'm a bit curious about is, so you guys are using like the RPG Maker like base code. Have you done any sort of modifications to like that engine?
Tanya has rewritten it so many times. Not even RPG Maker.
Okay, so the base itself is RPG Maker, but you've tweaked it and customized it.
So heavily modified that
to suit your own needs that it might as well be your own personal engine, I guess. At that point,
we used to have this. We used to have this distributor, Desura, and Tanya, tell them what happened when.
When we first got on Desura way back in the day, when Desura wasn't owned by Bad Juju, but that's a whole different thing. When we first got on Desura and we put up episode 1, they were like, okay, that's a really cool game. It looks great. It looks different than the other RPG Maker games. I'm like, awesome. We put up episode 2. They actually emailed me, and they said, because I put down the engine for RPG Maker VXAs, and they go, we don't believe you.
Bullshit. We call bullshit.
Yeah, bullshit. Yeah.
They called shenanigans on us. They really did. They're like, you need to, and they actually said you need to hit either custom or you need to select a different engine, because this was not made in VXA. I actually had to prove. Yeah,
she had to screenshot.
She had to screenshot the code source in VXA to prove that, hey, this is VXA's, right?
Yeah, it was.
She had to show the actual engine with the game in it.
Yeah, I had to show an editor screenshot, and I'm like, there you go. And so they're like, wow, that's pretty crazy.
But I think,
I'm saying to myself, can you imagine if they saw like Amber Throne now? You know what I mean?
I was just about to bring that up. People are coming around to the fact that with parallaxing, you can pretty much do anything aesthetically, and Amber Throne looks like it's hand painted, because it is.
Yeah, and I'm just gonna put a little plug out there for Amber Throne real quick in the devs there. I've been playing the hell out of that game. Amazing visuals, great gameplay. You guys did an amazing job, awesome job. But getting back to Kodal, though, with episode 2, and even especially with the rebirth update for episode 1, which I'm going to get into in a minute, the visuals themselves, the choice I was going for, we could have gone with any kind of visuals, really. I mean, we have pixel artists, we have, high-res artists, that type of thing. So we could have gone either way, or even a mishmash of the two. But I said early on in the going with episode 1, I wanted it to have its own distinct pixel flavor. I wanted it to be higher res, but still maintain that pixel look. I kind of wanted to go for in like the visual style of like a Final Fantasy IV Complete Collection type of thing, where it's still pixel art, but it's high res pixel art. And of course we took it down a darker avenue, and that's where we got our style from. But like over time, as I mentioned earlier, the rebirth update for episode 1, we enhanced those graphics even for the original game with this latest update, where to give an example, before the sprites on the overworld that you walked around with as your player character were the same in battle. They were these small, not very detailed sprites. And now they are more like the in-battle sprites, more like episode 2's character sprites. They're larger, more detailed. That they're still pixel art, but they're higher res. And that's what we're continuing with as we go along. And our visual style, it's going to evolve, as John says earlier. The key word is evolve. We're not gonna revolutionize, but we're gonna evolve our style as time goes on. And
if we're gonna revolutionize anything, it will be storytelling.
Absolutely, I agree with that. Absolutely. But in terms of visual art, I mean, even when we get into 3D, and we will be getting into 3D. I just want to put that out there. We will be doing 3D games, and we'll be doing a mishmash of 2D sprites with 3D environments. That's going to happen too. But even then, even our 3D art is going to bear that resemblance to what it is at its core, where it's coming from. You're going to know it's a Kotal game by looking at it. Every game has their own distinct style, and we mentioned Amber Throne earlier because it has its own distinct visual style. Unfortunately, RPG Maker games that don't utilize their own style, they use what's called the RTP, and they have all generic tiles and generic sprites, and everything's just generic looking, and they all look the same. So, I can see where that stigma comes from. And yeah, as John said, we have had folks commenting, "Oh, this is an RPG Maker game," fuck that, and I will say to these people, okay, you're entitled to that opinion, but let me ask you this: have you played the game yet? Give it a shot. There's a demo out there. Give it a shot. If you still don't like it, okay, I can accept that. And more often than not, we'll make a convert out of them, because they'll play it, they'll experience the story, they'll experience how it's different, how it not just looks different, but how it plays different than these other games. And they're going to know a lot more work went into this than your typical generic RPG, RPG 001 or whatever the hell it's called.
RPJ 001.
Yeah, right?
It wasn't even RPG, it was RPJ. That was terrible. It's this game on Desur. It looked like it was made by opening the engine and slapping a ball bag on the keyboard a couple of times.
It was pretty bad. But
Brian, going back to what you said at the beginning, you mentioned Gamer Eternal 777. That's a name I recognize. We have this following, these fans that are almost cult-like, and at first it was like a dozen people, and now it's honestly, if me and Tanya were to sit and name all these people, there's probably a lot more than just a dozen. There's probably 100. The cult grows, That's what we have. We have the cult following.
You have the cult following, which is great, which is absolutely amazing. So
it fits our aesthetic.
Good.
But just as one last thing, when it comes to the engine itself, RPG Maker for either VX for episode 1 or VX Ace for episode 2, we modified the living shit out of those engines.
It's barely recognizable.
I mean, you go into any of the code for especially episode 2, and let me tell you, you're not going to know what you're looking at unless you actually know Ruby, because even then you're going to be like, wow, what is this bullshit?
And Tanya, haven't you had people that have played episode 1 and 2 and they've gotten into RPG Maker thinking they can do the same thing and finding out that all the stuff we've done is not features in there?
No, and now let me put this out there too. A lot of people, and this is a great thing, not a bad thing, that the RPG Maker community puts out a lot of programming scripts and battle systems and all kinds of programming scripts to do all kinds of features for your game, which is amazing. I love that. And we do use quite a few of them too, which is great. But a lot of the scripts that we use together aren't supposed to go together. As a matter of fact, they clash so much that you always get an error. Now, as John can attest to, I'll put a bunch of these scripts together that are completely incompatible with each other and make them work.
Yeah, I mean, imagine having these two incompatible scripts that don't work and having to work around that. And then imagine it's 10 and none of them go together, and then Tanya will go to the mattresses, so to speak, and somehow figure it out.
So Tanya's Dr. Frankenstein, and the engine's her monster.
Yes. That's a good way of putting it.
That's a good way. It's a great way of putting it. Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
So there, Ron, you have things to look forward to as you continue your own dive into.
I as a slight aside, like it's just like you're gonna have to put this in the recording. Like, I knew, like, I'm just throwing around there for fun with the base engine. I'm not really tweaking much of anything in it. I'm just looking to see, A, can I make the game, and B, can I have the story be engaging enough so that, like, I would want to play it.
That's the most important thing. You got to have a story. If you don't have a story, you have nothing.
Yeah, I mean,
like there's a game out there, and I'm not meaning to talk shit, but there's a game out there that's on Steam. It's made with RPG Maker. It's called Memories of a Vagabond. It's got some really good features for gameplay. It's got some interesting scripts. What it doesn't have is a story.
No, there is no story.
And I can't get into it. I've tried to play this game, and it's got good reviews. It's done really well, and I'm just like, I can't see the appeal when there's literally you're just going from place to place and doing things for just to get to an arbitrary endpoint.
Well, I call Memories of a Vagabond this generation's Final Fantasy Mystic Quest, actually. I really do. Very, very light on story, or I should say basically no story, or very, very light on story. Mostly it's about gameplay and about introducing the player to RPG concepts. I think that's what they were going for, and if it wasn't what they were going for, well, that's apparently what you ended up with, because that's what it is to me. It's like this generation's Final Fantasy Mystic Quest, where no story, but
she's saying the M word.
Yeah.
You have a dark history with that.
Yeah.
All right. So
you know that, Brian.
Yes, I do.
Yeah.
All right. So I guess the other thing I'm kind of curious about is, so like you mentioned previously about how these the Chronicles, Dark Lord, the character stuff all originated with the AOL online like role plays. Are there things that have like particular characters that are not in the game yet, or that you want to have added?
A lot of that.
Like, I'll say, are there limitations in terms of power level, to use a DBZ term?
Oh yeah.
So, yeah. I mean, like, because those old chat rooms were like, I'm like anime edgy McCool kid 5000.
Tanya played with a group of people who didn't do that kind of thing. What you're talking about? Because I know exactly what you're talking about.
Okay.
No, the group of people our core group of people that we always played with, which is about a good 30, 40 people, across other guilds and that type of thing, their kingdoms and so forth. The people that we core RP'd with, they were all very, we all agreed without even saying anything what the level cap was, without even there being a level, so to speak.
It has to be about the story, not about wanting to beat everybody up.
Right, exactly. So even Magus, when he was at his peak of his power, and he was so powerful, and he could lay waste to things, he had his weaknesses, and they exploited that, and they beat him. It's like, we always kept that balance during RP. Now, that does translate over to the games, is that balance. That is something I really am really keen on when it comes to game dev, is balancing. I want the game to feel balanced, so that people can, if they want to over-level the crap out of their people, go ahead, and you'll trounce through most of the stuff. But I want people to be able to go through the game with not a huge amount of grinding, or even no grinding at all, and just literally just be able to play through it at the normal pace it's supposed to be, and experience everything, have a good healthy challenge, but not so incredibly difficult that it makes you be like, oh, Dark Souls, hi, how you doing? So I can't, that's something that's really, 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 I can't stress this enough. That is what I'm really about, is balancing in terms of game dev. I want the game to feel balanced. And if it doesn't, then I'm going to let you know, and, it needs to be fixed. I played a game recently that was completely unbalanced. And I mean, like, completely unbalanced. And I actually sent an email to the dev, and I said, you're really going to work on this. Excuse me, you're really going to work on this. This is, I mean, I can get through this game with my eyes closed. And they sent me an email back, and they said, thank you very much. I actually needed to hear that because no one else was telling me. And I found it incredible. I was like, really? Not even your own testers were telling you this? So it was kind of interesting for me, because I had, I'd like to network with other devs and so forth, but like, I'm noticing that some of these devs, they're not getting the feedback from their own team that they need from outsiders, so to speak.
To be fair, some of them don't have teams.
But this is a lot of them are only one man groups, so that's, you know what I mean. It's just, it is what it is. But some of those that do have teams that have QA and so forth, they're not getting that type of feedback. They figure, well, Final Fantasy VI, if that's easy and that's a masterpiece, then hey, whatever, right?
Yeah, but FF6 was easy once you understood the mechanics and how it worked.
So, Tanya, where in Kisareth are you hiding all of the metal slimes for people to level grind?
Where's your metal slimes? Where's Ultima? Where's Ultima Weapon?
Where's the Metal King slimes? Where's...
They're in my back pocket. I'm waiting to bring them out.
we you know what? We actually like to give people kind of a lot of control over that. In episode 1, we have that meter that fills up as you walk. And
yep.
You could use that to your advantage. You could use it, honestly, I think, to your disadvantage to avoid battles, because you're not going to have a fun time at all if you do that.
I think that the meter reminds me of basically what some RPGs do.
It's a temptation meter.
It kind of is another way of using... obviously all the enemies are hidden, but it to me feels the same way as if you actually had all of the enemies visible.
Yeah, and in episode 2, they're visible.
Yep.
And they don't respawn, but there's little tricks you could do, like leaving the area or going into the Scion grid to spawn enemies, because enemies are attracted to the Scions. And there's always ways to overlevel. I spoke with somebody on Steam that was level 80 in episode 2 before they even got to the final chapter.
Well, that's what you call obliteration at that point, and some people do.
That was the way this person liked to play the games. And that's fine. And you have that option, or you can be that person that, and I see it in Let's Players all the time, they see that meter and they fall to the temptation of letting it fill up and then like stopping and letting it fill, like empty out. And they avoid enemies because they think, oh, I don't have to fight random battles. And then they get annihilated by a boss and they realize, oh, I do. It's a way, the point of the battle bar wasn't so people could not fight enemies. It was so, like, let's say you just fought a boss and you're really weak and you need to get back to town. Your super powerful, army of kings doesn't get, toppled by an orc. Because that's a trope that happens in video games where you just destroyed a god, but then you're so weak afterwards that, the next slime kills you. And in episode 2, you can just skate past the enemies by weaving in and out of them, but it's not smart. Yeah, you can upgrade just using the Scion grid, but you have to, fight bosses to get those Wisdom Scions, so...
Basically, yeah. So.
Yeah.
I'm still looking forward to a no Scion grid run from somebody doing like a speed run or something like that. It's gonna be fun.
That could be done. Not that it could be done. I mean, obviously, Magus is going to be very weak, but I mean, if you use like Riggs and Josiah and Ariadne, it could be done.
Mm.
So there's the challenge for you, Internet.
Because there's 3 characters that don't use the Scion grid.
Tanya has thrown down the gauntlet
Yeah. Go
Oh,
ahead,
and
try it.
another thing that Tanya did in episode 2, which I love, is she has these characters, especially Riggs and Josiah, these two generic soldier characters are sort of like the two soldiers from
Your
Breath
Biggs
of
and
Fire
Wedge.
1. No, not at all. Like that, like Breath of Fire 1 had this whole section where you played as Nina, who was a very
Yeah.
nice character, but she had these two soldiers that came with you. They're completely temporary characters, and everybody that plays episode 2 assumes that these guys are going to either die or they're going to go away. They don't have scion grids. They're not important characters. And then they are with you throughout the whole game, and like one of them is like kind of important in the ending, and it really does turn that on its head, and one of these characters is going to be pretty major in the next game.
Which leads me to my last question for this half, because I do have to insert an intermission in there.
Okay.
So between the two games, there's a hefty amount of characters. So how are you managing to keep track of all that so that the player doesn't get lost with all of these different plot threads and backstories?
Please don't tell me you guys have a Xenosaga dictionary.
We don't have anything like that. No.
Okay.
Actually, I'll take this real quick. This is actually a very quick answer, and honestly, the answer is there's a game for everything. We'll put it that way. When I first started the series, I knew pretty much who was going to be a character and who wasn't going to be a character from the RP and whatnot, or even original new characters, or new lands even, because we have especially episode 1 really is a departure from the RP.
It's almost an original story.
Yeah, very little what happened in that game, except for like the prologue happened in the RP. But anyway, no, really, a lot of these characters, a lot of what you don't see behind the scenes or in between time periods and whatnot, you're gonna see, you're gonna experience this stuff. Where if you see in a game 1 year later, there's a reason why I put 1 year later, because I already have an idea for a game that's going to explain that period. Or, there's, like I said, there's a game for everything that we're doing.
And to give an alternate answer, Tanya, because I think what Brian is thinking is more like some people who are like, oh, who's this character? And, they were in episode 1, but maybe they don't remember them. We've remade the episode 1 a bunch of times already, but there is going to be an HD version. And one feature that I want to have is like what I would call a chronicle, where you would actually, like almost like the bestiary, be able to look at a character and get like a little bio and a little history when they join you.
I love Final Fantasy Tactics, pretty much. Kind of like
yeah,
that.
kind of, but basically, we try to. It's pretty centralized. Most of the characters that are in episode 2 were in episode 1. There's a few new ones, but they're being introduced in I think a very organic way. There's nobody that shows up that's like, oh, you're my old friend from a million years ago, and we have this history together that we're not going to talk about.
So no Xenogears style. Hey, here's a character that you see for 30 seconds and then doesn't show up for another 40 hours. So.
No.
So you've basically written the characters in the world in a various ways so that it would play as like a living world, and that these characters have their own various goals and whatnot.
Chronicles of Dark Lord is very much Magus' story.
John, can I ask for like some specification on what you were just mentioning? Were you talking about something kind of like what they do in Kingdom Hearts, where they have like the journal with some information on the characters, so you kind of know who they are and where they're from?
Yeah, kind of like that.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think that'd be cool.
It'd be like something in the menu, and you just like kind of like this status screen in episode 2, where it gives you a little like tiny blurb about the character, but it might give you like more than that,
Mm-hmm. Gotcha.
Yeah, be more detailed.
But Chronicles of Dark Lord is very much Magus' story, and as Tanya mentioned, some of these other characters are going to get their own stories as well. I'm working on a game for the future that's actually Anto's story, and it actually is the same exact story as episode 1, but it's told from his perspective. And then we have this other game that's called Shenandoah Zero Chronicle, which is about the past and how the world, started and how it all came to be. And I spent the last few weeks writing the whole mythology of the world and feeding that to Tanya, who's just in love with it. And, how these things that she created had an origin. There's one thing you have to remember about all these characters. They're all based on people, too.
Mm-hmm.
Like, Magus is pretty much Tanya.
Yeah, pretty much. Except I don't kill people, okay? I
was about to ask.
She thinks about it a lot, though.
So wait a minute. So, Tanya, you have a deep dislike of teddy bears?
Okay, I'm actually...
That was... Honestly, that was something that came from somebody who's not in the company anymore. We just keep it because it's funny.
Okay, so you keep it as a running gag. Okay.
It's a running gag.
It's a running gag at this point.
There was a person who worked for us that thought of, like, how come all these old RPGs always have teddy bears sitting in the item shops and you can't interact with them in any way? And he thought it would be funny if you could blow them up. And then Tanya came up with this backstory as to why Tanya hates teddy bears. And if you played Nightmare Vision, I gave a little bit of a hint towards that with the whole part where he's put on trial by a bunch of teddy bears.
Yes!
That was my favorite part to write, by the way.
That boss battle was just...
There's a story behind that, Brian.
Yeah.
Hold on.
We
one
were
second.
trolling Chris.
Into it.
You know Chris Waglin, of course.
Yes.
Yeah.
And Tanya likes to put things in there that are not really... She put a sprite for a teddy bear boss in episode 1 in the folder. It's not actually in the game, but she put it in the folder, and he found it and assumed that there was this teddy bear boss that you can fight, and drove himself insane trying to figure out how to trigger that battle. And eventually, after iteration and iteration of the game and a couple of years, we had to sit him down and tell him there never was a teddy bear boss, and that Tanya was messing with him.
He had to have intervention.
And then when I was doing the DLC, I thought it would be hilarious to actually put the teddy bear boss in there. And because it was all about Magus' psyche anyway, it was all about what makes him tick. And it is related to a trauma from his past, and that's why he hates teddy bears. And I'm not going to say it exactly because it's a story that we plan on telling. But when I went to Chris Waglin and I said, by the way, Nightmare Vision has a teddy bear boss, he did not believe me. Even when I showed him a screenshot, he thought I faked it. It wasn't until he actually played it that he believed it.
Inventing that whole thing, I was laughing my ass off the whole time.
I got the name of that particular teddy
Theodore
bear.
Rex Pin.
Yes, I got there and I said, okay, where's Alfie?
Alfie?
If we're gonna continue the trend of like naming things after 80s and 90s toys, where's Alfie?
Where's Alf?
Where's Alfie? Is there like
Don't give me any ideas here.
a portal where you can go to like Light Bright World or
Maybe we need these little enemies called Pogs.
Maybe. So,
well, actually, there was a boss in Breath of Fire called Pog.
He was like a giant fat troll, I think.
No, it was a two-headed dragon.
Oh, okay. Couldn't remember. It's been a while since I played that game.
alrighty. So we will keep the discussion going with Kisareth, obviously. We still have a whole second half to go through. So in the meantime, you guys will have some music, because that's what I usually do. You listen, we'll cut out for a few minutes, we'll talk amongst ourselves. You are listening to Downloadable Content, talking with Kisareth Studios. We'll be back. Welcome back to Downloadable Content. We're all still here. None of us have gone. We haven't buggered off. We're all still here, giving you. Hopefully you are entertained.
Are you not entertained?
Are you not entertained?
Somebody had to say it.
So, well, you knew that was coming. So, moving right along. So we mentioned, we talked at length, really, in the first half, about the story of the Kotal games. Something else that is also really important to me, and I think that to all of us who have played JRPGs, is the music. And I'm sure most of us have been spoiled rotten by the likes of Nobuo Uematsu, Yatsunori Misuda, Koichi Sugiyama, if you are a Dragon Quest fan. And so, how did you guys decide ultimately on the music for each game? Because there are definitely moments in, I'll use Final Fantasy, classic Final Fantasy, where the music evokes a definite mood, and there are certain scenes in the first two Kotal games where I definitely feel that.
Well, the music is there's one thing at a game develop. Excuse me. Wow, one thing out of game development that I really wanted to get right, besides gameplay and story and everything else that goes with it, but is the music. Because, like you, music plays a heavy role in my games. I need to feel something when I'm there, and music does that for me. So, what I was going for actually for the Kotal games, especially with episode 1, was I wanted something that could evoke a feeling of oh shit, and then another one that could evoke a feeling of, determined to see this through, even though I'm angry as hell. I really wanted to have that progressive, not really gothic, but I guess you could call it progressive goth metal,
Symphonic metal.
Yeah. That type of feel to it, because I feel that really meshes well with the Kotal style of gaming, of where the game's storyline is, where its heart is at. Because, as it's been said many times, Magus is not a nice man. He's not a Cecil. He's not a Tara Branford. He's a Dark Lord, and
maybe more like Golbez than Cecil.
Yeah, he's more like Golbez than Cecil. So I mean, the mood that has to be portrayed should reflect that, even in the most dire moments. Now, to pick out a tune real quick from episode 1, the Anathema of Life. This plays when you
fight Anto.
That's when you fight Anto for the final time in the game, and it's epic, it's driving, it's aggressive, it's all these things. It's progressive metal.
And we've had this feedback of like, oh, Anto's kicking my ass. I had to fight him 9 times, but at least the music is awesome.
Right. And that's something that I really wanted to get that feeling with, was that as you're fighting in this epic struggle against an even more evil adversary than you are, I want it to be like literally two forces of nature clashing together.
Well, Scorned Angry Cats will do that.
Yes.
But you also want it to sound good.
Oh, yes. Of course. And haven't been, and as you said, Brian, haven't been spoiled rotten by games like Chrono Trigger and Final Fantasy, classic Final Fantasy games and whatnot, where you do get that feelings evoked during
Cross.
Chrono Cross is a huge one.
Of the best soundtracks of all time.
Oh, one
of all time.
All time, absolutely.
I'm gonna let you finish.
But like, even in like the 16-bit era, especially in the 16-bit era, and into the 32-bit era, you could hear something, when Golbez first arrives on the scene in Final Fantasy IV. When you hear Golbez clad in darkness for the first time, you go, "Shit just got real." That's the first thing that goes into your mind. Holy shit, this guy is gonna fucking kill me.
Or how about Dancing Mad?
Dancing Mad. epic as hell. My personal favorite final boss theme of all time. Dancing Mad is epic. It tells a story, and that's what you want out of your soundtrack. You don't want to just put together whatever. It took me, along with others, of course, but it took me about a good solid 2.5 months to put together the soundtrack for episode 1. And then we brought on board our composer, Morte McAdams, and he did a lot of the tracks for episode 2. And when I first heard his stuff, I went, "That's Kodal."
Yeah, this guy gets it, kind of.
This guy gets it. This is what.
You talk about Marielle as well.
Yeah, exactly. This is what we are. This is what our games mean. In musical form, and that's what you have to portray. It's not easy. It's very hard to find what kind of sound your game is supposed to have. I can tell you a game that got it wrong. In terms of music, actually, and at least to me, and that would be Celestian Tales, something North or whatever it is. Great game, but the music it's displaced. It didn't evoke any real feelings for me. It was just kind of there, and that just to be said about that. But like, I want, like you said, Brian, to feel something when I'm in these scenes. When I'm living through these people, I want to be able to feel something, and I wasn't feeling it for that game. So it's a good game, but it was lacking in that music department. But but definitely, for Kodal, especially for episode 1, it took so long to get together the right soundtrack. And with the Rebirth update, we actually added new tracks. With the DLC, we added new tracks, which I think are as epic as hell.
And it's going to be a DLC for episode 2 that is going to have new music as well. Or one thing that I just did the other day is I remastered the overworld music, because we'd like that to have a slightly different feel with the expansion.
There were times playing both Kodal games where to me, it sounded like you were pulling inspiration from, now you say, symphonic metal, and the first thing I think of is Trans-Siberian Orchestra.
Oh, love that. Yeah.
I was thinking more like Within Temptation, but I'll take that.
That works too. That's another good example. I mean,
Evergrey is a good example.
Hailstorm.
Or just Morte's music, because that's like Morte does that kind of thing,
Yep.
Because, that was just the first thing I think, which is not something I don't usually equate, sort of that symphonic metal to a game in a JRPG style. It's just something that doesn't, usually sing. I'm much more familiar with music that has, definitely, Asian sources, or, in Final Fantasy, definitely in Final Fantasy IV, definitely Celtic sources. But it works very, very well.
Though.
Yes.
But if you think of that kind of like progressive metal, because it all does fall under that category, and like, what is the thing that people hear when they listen to a band like a Dream Theater or a Rush, or they say, "Oh, it sounds like a video game." Like, how many times have you heard some of those crazy solos and you think, "Oh, that sounds like it could be like in a Castlevania or something"? It's just the way it is.
Yep. But yeah, Brian, you are right. You don't hear that sound in games except for ours, and that is one of the many things that do make our games unique. Is that we took a sound you don't normally hear, especially in JRPGs, and I believe that we not only did it, but we made it work, and we made it work well. You can, because then again, our games lend themselves, the story, the characters lend themselves to that kind of music. Like, if Kodal was instead Chronicles of a Light Bitch, or I don't know what you want to call it. But
Chronicles of a dumb ass hoe.
right? If it was Chronicles of somebody else, and our character was all, I'm happy-go-lucky, and I'm all light and airy and wee, and
Why is it gotta be white?
I said light, not white. I said light. Wow. I wouldn't be able to do that sound for that game.
Chronicles of a cracker.
Yeah, it wouldn't
It's got
work.
alliteration. I don't know, there might be something to that.
No, it definitely wouldn't work, because every game has its own sound. Even
Going back to influences, musically, there's an East influence in there as well, too, because East was one of the first, if not the first, RPGs to have any kind of heavy metal in the soundtrack.
And I just want to put this out there, too, that Episode 2 actually has a distinctly... It's similar, but it actually has a distinctly different sound than Episode 1 does.
Oh, yeah.
Well,
just listen to the overworld.
Yeah, I mean, you're going to notice as you're going through Episode 2 that the mood that each track evokes is just very different than Episode 1's. It's still similar in terms of styling, but it definitely has a different mood. It evokes different feelings. Then, like John said, the overworld just is a dichotomy, actually, between the overworld tracks in Episode 1 and Episode 2.
Very good. I'm looking forward to hearing what gets cooked up for Episode 3. So I'm looking forward to that. Ryan, feel free to chime in. You've been kind of quiet over there, so.
Yeah.
Ryan.
Hi.
I see dead people. Anyway.
Okay, then.
I am dead people.
Are there any other sources that you guys have drawn upon, like not that's not like a video game related thing? Like, is there anything from like modern media or classic literature?
Ghostbusters.
I gotta step in here, actually. Tanya's influence is mainly video games. And then I'm the one that I put in these influences from other games. I mentioned how Nightmare Vision was based on, The Wall by Pink Floyd, because it was a story about a guy being lost in his own head. And I'll come up with these things, and Tanya will be like, where do you come up with this crap? And I'll be like, oh, that's like kind of a influence from like Harry Potter or whatever. And then she'll see it, I'm particularly influenced by other media other than video games, which I think is important because I don't think that games should self-cannibalize until the point where it becomes a parody of itself.
Oh no, definitely not.
But I'm very influenced by music and movies and literature, and video games too. But I like to turn it all on its head.
And actually, I'm really, in addition to gaming, there are other influences for me, of course, too. But like, the primary influences I've got, besides obviously video games, which is my primary influence.
Tiny's influenced by real life too.
Is real life. I'll draw a lot of inspiration from what I see going on around me, or what's going on in my own life,
or what has happened in the past,
or what has happened. And I'll draw from that, and it'll become something within a game. Whether it's even a small little detail. A lot of me, as I've told this plenty of times to the team, but a lot of me is in these games.
Not just you, but Carissa and everybody. Yeah, I mean, like when I'm writing The Offspring, which is the expansion to Episode 2, and I'm writing the character of Ziria Lee, and I say, like, how do I write what Ziri is going to say? And I think, what would Carissa say?
Because Carissa, as John says, Carissa and Ziria, the lines between the two blur with every day.
Yeah, they become increasingly blurred.
But no, it's like a lot of the
scares the crap out of some of our fans, by the way.
Oh God, yeah.
I had this one guy that said to me, he thought that Ziri was based on Tanya, and I said no, Ziri is Carissa, and she says, remind me never to fuck with Carissa.
Even adding to that, like, I haven't had much time in Kisareth to add an influence, but I know that when I do, a lot of me comes from an anime watching background and just cartoons in general. So I know that's where I draw a lot of like what I'll be bringing to the table.
Okay, and then I guess to kind of go along with that is like, what, like, you guys have mentioned like how you use like tropes to, like you acknowledge various tropes and tweak them and make fun of them and stuff like that. Is there a particular one or like a particular scene that you guys like, similar to like the teddy bear stuff? Like, is there something that you guys are particularly proud of that you did? Like one moment or one scene in either Chronicles 1 or Chronicles 2.
I'll let you guys answer that first. You go ahead, both of you guys, John and Ryan.
Other than the teddy bear scene, huh? Well, I think a lot of it is going to come out in my next game. It's just Shenandoah Zero Chronicle. So I think that some of the scenes that I have in my head are pulled from these tropes. I don't want to really get into it too much because I don't want to spoil anything. But actually, I can tell you one thing is in episode 2 is the whole idea of having the chapter system, which was something that Tanya kind of came up with without realizing that she came up with it. When we were working on the game, she had these titles in the project file for chapters, like the Empress and the Messenger and Unto the Breach and all this crap. And she never intended for the game to have this like real splits where, it would have the names pop up on the screen and everything, and I took it upon myself to make the graphics cards because I thought, let's do like a Dragon Quest IV type of thing with the chapters.
That was the first thing I thought of when I got my hands on the first build or so that I was able to go through. I'm like, somebody's been playing Dragon Quest IV.
Yeah, and the thing is, like, Tanya comes up with these things that are almost ideas, and then I'll expand on them and kind of kick it back to her, and then and basically that's how we work so well together, is that I like to explain the things that she does. Like she'll do something and then I'll say, well, this is why it happens, and then she'll expand on that. And with the chapters, it was like she wasn't planning on having the game be like that. That was just her way of organizing the files. But then when I made those graphic cards that pop up when the chapters start, she's like, the whole game changed at that point. And yeah, it was kind of like Dragon Quest in the sense that, like it's all building up towards, like the last one, which is the bulk of the game. But we were also expanding on it because all of these other things, it was all about the War of the Abyss and showing you what's happening in the rest of the world. Yes, it's Magus' story, but this is a story that's bigger than him. And it's not often in a game that you leave the main character behind for so long.
No. I mean, now, what do you think, Ryan? What scene stands out to you as being like either pulled from a trope or turning a trope on its head or something like that?
In Chronicles of the Dark Lord 1, because that's the only game I've played so far, I think, like we talked about the battle bar earlier, was probably one of the most, unique aspects of this game other than the story itself, like as far as like playing the game. Something that stood out was the battle bar, and as I think I mentioned in the chat, like it creates such an interactivity and a temptation to not do battles, and
the temptation
that'll screw you over.
Oh, I know, Tanya. The naval battles in episode 2 were a big
I was actually
part.
going to mention that.
That was something that would have been done in a cutscene, and Tanya's like, why not get to actually play that part?
Yeah, that was something that came across very organically. Actually, that was like John said, when this cutscene,
I think like what you were going
I'm
for.
very proud of this cutscene, actually.
Correct me if I'm wrong, Tanya, but were you initially going to go for like a Breath of Fire 1 sort of naval battle, and then you were like, nah, screw it?
Yeah, I was actually going to go for that, and to answer your question, Ron, yeah, I am very proud of this whole sequence in episode 2, where I could have gone with, like John said, like a Breath of Fire 1 type of naval battle cutscene type thing. But instead, I said, fuck it. Let's give more to the player. How do I do this where I can actually make naval battles in the game while maintaining the battle system the way it is? Something that has never been seen before, I don't think, in any other
It's always a cutscene. It was never a gameplay aspect like that.
Yeah, I think episode 2 is the only JRPG that has naval battles like that. I think that might be right. And
I can't think of another.
yeah,
I need to play this. I need to play Chronicles of the Dark Lord 2.
Yes, you do.
Yes,
But I need to beat one first, and I haven't beaten one yet.
But I'll help you beat one if you need it.
I just haven't had the time.
But yeah, I'm so proud of that whole sequence, Ron, because I could have just, like John said, I could have just went, nah, we'll just do a cutscene and that'll be the end of it.
Oh, I know another one. I just
But
thought
I
of another one, Tanya.
What's that?
There's the scene in episode 1 where you play as Anto and Zexer.
Actually, and that lent itself to a chapter in episode 2.
And, yeah, I remember we had this conference. This is before you were around, Brian. We had this conference. We were talking about it. So many of the fans thought it was so cool that for this one part of the game, you played as the bad guys. And Tanya said, I think we're the first game to do that where you just play as the villain. And I was like, well, Black Ops 2 kind of did it. And
It's
and then
Breath of Fire 3.
Tanya took that as a challenge, I think, and that's why in episode 2 there's an entire chapter where you're playing as the Abyssal side.
Well, what do indies do? We innovate, and even if it's the subtle details, we innovate, and I want to innovate, I want to evolve, I want to innovate, and the reception from that one scene in episode 1 where you play as Anto and Zexor, that was tremendous. I was like, okay, we're on to something there. We got to expand on that. So next game, obviously, we did a whole chapter, and we're going to expand on it more. I'm not going to say exactly what, but we're going to expand on that more as time goes on. Where.
Well, we already have that planned because we have a whole game that we're going to be doing where you're Anto.
Oh yeah, well that's a whole game. I mean,
and that was actually planned for quite a while.
Yeah, that's been planned for quite a while. I mean, like the actual main entries in the series.
Yeah.
You're gonna see it more and more as it goes along, in different ways too. Like I have an idea for episode 3 already that I'm gonna keep close to the chest right now. But it's something that I think it's gonna kind of blow everybody's mind when they actually play it.
Oh, I think you're talking about the whole Obsidian Rose thing, right?
Well, yeah.
Yeah, I don't want to give away anything either, but I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, please don't. I actually want to be quite surprised when I actually do get my little hands on the eventual build. But I can certainly, just as an aside, I can totally see when the game where you're playing as Anto, I can totally see him having some sort of like Kefka-esque lines. There is sand on my boots! Anyway.
There's actually a part, because I have written a little bit of it, where he's talking to Exides, and Exides is this guy who just kind of likes to go on and on about how great he is, and there's a part where Anto just says, I don't care.
You sound like chapters from a self-help manual.
Because he starts going on about his motivations, and Anto's like, stop. I don't.
Save your breath. I don't give a damn.
Yeah, John, bless you. I hate antagonists who spend 5 hours pontificating.
Oh, well, that's Exides in a nutshell.
I'm surprised more RPGs don't do that. They're just expounding why they're going to control everything. Where I'm just waiting for somebody to just go, with a bullet and just like, boom, there. Problem solved.
What it was? It wasn't that. There was a movie that ended like that called Wizards, by the way, where these two wizards were supposed to fight at the end, and one just pulls out a gun and shoots the other.
Yeah.
But it wasn't really so much as a commentary. It was really just that's Anto's personality. He's completely nihilistic. He doesn't care about other people, even his allies, or he doesn't even think he has allies. He has pawns. And a king doesn't care about the pawn's life.
And John's mentioned this frequently in the past to the team and to other people, and I've said it too. But Anto, in episode 2 especially, since he's the main antagonist in that game, he doesn't just do a couple things and then nothing like in a lot of JRPGs that you see for villains. He's reactionary. the party will defeat a boss. He'll blow up a kingdom. They'll fight to a standstill in a battlefield. He'll throw a tidal wave at you.
And that's not at all a JRPG. JRPGs always had this thing where the big boss would just kind of sit in his castle and wait for you to show up and kill him.
They just fester,
I know what the influence was, and it's not a game that Tanya likes, but I know she likes the villain, is Final Fantasy II. The Emperor in that game, every time you did something, he'd destroy another town.
Yeah, there was...
And there was also Blackthorn from Ultima 5 was a little bit like that.
Yeah, but I wasn't thinking so much of that one. But yeah.
No, but Anto is really interesting because he's so full of rage. He really is just a angry little fuck, and and we're gonna get into his backstory more. But basically, he's just this broken person who has almost nothing going for him. So that's his reaction: is just wipe everything out. So there's nothing. He wants to be the king of nothing.
That I'm really looking forward to that backstory.
Maybe I should say he wants to be the emperor of nothing.
Yeah.
See what I did there?
But well, I'm certainly looking forward to that because I might draw comparisons to him to my own cat. So to my own cat.
What's funny is in the original RP, I think he literally was a cat.
Yeah, in the original RP, he was this little black cat.
Now, yeah, he's actually what's known as a Shoral in the game.
The black cats are like the random Trigun kitty that appears in every episode. One of those.
I don't know nothing about that.
Yeah.
I know that was good. Yeah. I know.
So moving right along then. Shifting more towards future plans for Kisareth. So now that the two games are finally on Steam, I know that was a massive goal for the company, and finally you got there.
You have no idea.
It was, and I know that Steam greenlight process initially was such a mess.
They didn't know what they were doing, and the developers didn't know what they were doing, and the people voting didn't know what they were doing.
But now that you're on that platform, what has the reception been like? You know, not just on Steam, but also on the other places where you've sold these games, Desera, before it went bye-bye.
It does vary from place to place. The Steam community can be a little rough, but we went in expecting that. We knew that the Steam community is full of the PC master race, and that some people are like, if it is an HD widescreen,
1080p maxed out by 2.
Yeah, then it's crap. We do get a little bit of that. We do get a little bit of the this is RPG Maker, therefore it can't be good sort of attitude. But, like I said, those people, not necessarily in our demographic. I respect the opinion to a certain extent, but I don't agree with it. And I think that the sales have been good. That's what's important, really. I mean, the reception on Steam has been mixed. On Desera, it's been excellent. Then there's other sites that specialize in RPGs where they're touting us as, like, the greatest thing since Betty White, so...
Betty White. That's good. That's good.
Well, I read this thing that said that Betty White is actually older than sliced bread.
Yes, that's...
I thought when they invented sliced bread, did they say it was the best thing since Betty White?
Yeah.
No, but like John said, no, it really depends upon where you go. I mean, I will say that on Steam, I was very... I should say I was very determined to make sure that every single customer... or every person, or every would-be customer, or even just potentials, every post that was made on our Steam forums got answered. That was something I really, really was, and to this day, we still make sure that every single person gets answered by us. We wanted to engage.
The middle finger's an answer, right?
Yeah, well,
In some cases.
I wanted to.
No is an answer,
I
right?
wanted
Do you have a stock folder of middle fingers and no signs and fuck offs for people to read through?
Hey, get out of my hard drive.
Yeah, right.
My personal favorite, and I use this on Tumblr a lot, is an image of you missed the point,
You missed the point.
and there's a point, and there's an arrow representing you, and you're far away from it.
My friend Andrew likes to use an image of an airplane going overhead.
I was just gonna say that too. Yeah, yeah, but I mean, I mean, like, I was unprepared at first for the flood of comments that came in and questions about the game, and they all got answered, and that really helped us. It really did. It showed that we're a dev that listens to our fans, and the things that in reviews and so forth that were critiquing the game, we fixed as much as we could for the Rebirth update. So, that also shows that we go back to our earlier games and we're still tweaking them. We're still supporting them. We're not going to just stop, all support for a game and that's it. I can name a few developers that do that. I don't know who there might be, Square Enix, but like,
any major developer in the past 10 years.
Yeah, EA. Yeah, but like, it's true. It's that we're always 20 years from now, we're going to be supporting Episode 1 HD. It's just how it is. I mean, obviously by then it's going to be we're going to be doing other things and whatnot, but we're always going to support our games.
By then it'll be Episode 1 10K.
Well,
10K.
there is.
Well, I hope it doesn't get to. I was reading this thing about high resolutions, and apparently after a 4K, the human eye can't see the difference.
Yeah,
that's what they're saying for 2K or 4K or something like that. It might be 4K.
Once you go beyond 4K is pretty much like reality resolution.
Yeah, at that point it'll be on Episode 1 holodeck.
Well, isn't 60 FPS also supposed to be reality?
Yeah, 60 FPS.
That's about what our brains process.
That's what our brains process.
Yet people still feel the need to go higher.
Yeah, like 120 FPS, which really honestly, like...
that'll give you a headache real fast.
Yeah, 120 FPS, I've seen games that do that, and on systems that do that, and let me tell you, there's no point.
Yeah.
There's no point to it.
I think I played a game at 120 FPS and I didn't notice a difference.
Oh, and for the PC Master Race out there, all of our games run at 60 FPS.
Just twist the knife a little more, Tanya. Just dig it a little deeper there. No, that's fine. I'm relatively new to the land of PC gaming myself. For 25 years, I was straight console. You weren't getting me near a PC at all. Now my Steam library is ever growing. So here's a question for you. Are you planning to eventually make an appearance at PAX East?
Yes, and I actually want to get into this. Apparently one of my guys has to get going, so...
Oh, all right. Well, thank you for being on, Ryan.
Thank you for having me. See
Ryan,
you guys
have
later.
a great night.
See you. Have a good night.
You as well.
But no, we will be at PAX East. It's just a question of... really, it's a question of timing and... Not so much money anymore, but it's a question of timing. Because the money... Before, it was going to be like 10 grand to get a booth at PAX East. But now we've made some inroads, we've done some networking, and we brought that price down significantly by going through other people. I pretty much 90% sure we're going to be at next year's PAX East, because the money will be there, no problem. But it's the timing, really, because while I want to absolutely be there and have a booth and showcase our games to everybody, obviously, who doesn't want to do that? If I'm in the middle of working on, or if I'm in the middle of a release schedule, if something's to be released like that week, then I won't be able to be there. I mean, I might send other people, but I won't be able to be there. So like, it really does depend upon timing.
We really are scattered all over the place too.
Yes. So, I mean, if I can't be there with a couple of other team members who live, around, Massachusetts, whatnot, then no, we may not be there because it all depends upon, again, timing. Because our release schedule, we have quite a few games being released between now and the end of 2016. So, yeah.
Well, I certainly hope you make it to the PAX East Indie booth because, as I have mentioned when we do our PAX recaps year after year, the indie floor is getting bigger. With each progressive convention, the space that they have devoted to indie games gets bigger and bigger and bigger, and it's such a wonderful sight to see how much indie gaming has taken up enough space on the expo floor to compete with the big guys. And even some of the bigger indie studios like Supergiant Games and the Behemoth, I mean, they take up good huge chunks of the floor, and they're cozying right up to Nintendo or Capcom or Microsoft, and it's really, really great to see. So I'm really, really hoping to see you there. I mean, I'm not that far away. I'm in Albany. That's a 3-hour drive. So
yeah, no, that's not far. I mean, like I said, I absolutely want to be there, and as long as the timing is right, and the money I'm sure will be there, then yeah, we'll definitely be there. I mean, I'll probably be bringing myself and our QA guy, our director of QA, Chris Waglin. He'll probably be there with me, along with probably Brandon and probably Ryan, who was just here, because they live not less than 5 minutes away from me. So, I'll be bringing them with me. So, I mean, we'll probably have a good 4 to 6, maybe 7 people there for the booth. So it should be good. I think it should be exciting.
Well, good. I'm looking forward to it. That'd be great. Be like, hey, I can finally meet you in the flesh.
Yes, and
That's not creepy at all.
And they will be for hugs. There will be hugs to be had. It will happen.
So, I am just about out of questions, actually. So, Ron, do you have anything left?
You guys don't have to answer this if you don't want to, but do you guys eventually want to, I don't know if you even have one right now, like a Kickstarter or a Patreon of some kind, so that you can get more interaction with the fans outside of your forums? And
we've tried that in the past. It crashed and burned. We might try it in the future for titles that have a higher budget now that we have somewhat of a name for ourselves.
Okay.
But the problem with that is that Kickstarter and Indiegogo and those sorts of websites started off as great ways for indie developers to gain revenue, it has become so cluttered and so full that you pretty much have to already be really well known to get anything. And that's why you're seeing these huge projects from people like Keiji Inafune and Koji Igarashi and the creators of Banjo-Kazooie are on there. And they're getting all the money, and the indie people who haven't worked in the industry are not really getting it.
Okay, because I knew that was a potential growth for indie people, but that was my fears that now that it's becoming more mainstream for the developers that don't have a job, that it's kind of pushing out the indie scene.
Yeah, which is what it was created for.
Yeah, it's really becoming that mainstream thing. I mean, look at Shenmue. They Sony put Shenmue on Kickstarter just to gauge customer reaction, not even for funding it, just to gauge customer reaction to it. So,
yeah,
I mean,
they could have gone on any forum on the internet and done that.
Yeah, they could have put a poll and say, "Hey, do you guys want to see us make Shenmue 3?" and there would have been a positive thing, but they would have gotten.
I understand why they did it that way, though, because there are people who say they want something, and then when it comes out, they don't necessarily buy it.
Whereas Sony now has $3 million for them to play around with.
Essentially, all that was not for funding; it was pre-orders. Let's face it. That
was a pre-order.
They want people to put their money where their mouth is, and I understand that.
I understand.
Because development costs have, over the past 25 years, development costs have gone up tenfold at least, while the price of a game is not. So I understand that.
And you know that, and again, you know, I mean, I'm not saying we won't ever put anything out on Kickstarter or on Indiegogo or Patreon or anything like that. It's just, you know, we have certain budgets that we work with, and you know, for each project that we're working on, or even, you know, I mean, like, honestly, like, and this is some business advice actually for any aspiring game devs. Ron, you too. If you're going to create a project and you know you're going to need a team, if you can't do it by yourself, and I'm not saying that you automatically need a team. Some people don't, and more power to them, because that's amazing. But if you know you're going to need a team, then the first thing you got to ask these people is, or even tell them, you're not going to get paid right away. You know, you're not going to get paid right away. Are you okay with that until the game starts making money? And that's really what it boils down to. Because I've met quite a few people in the industry who are in it for the passion of gaming, and they know that, and they understand it, and they're awesome with it. But then I met other people who are in it for the money. And if you're in it for the money,
you're in the wrong industry.
You're in the wrong industry, honestly. You really are. You're in the wrong industry.
I agree with that. It's like, I don't get why people, like business executives, want to get into the, like, they see money when they get into look at video games. They don't see any of the hard work or the passion that goes into it, and it's just like, you guys are what's wrong with the business world right now.
Yeah, well, I mean, look at some of the business decisions lately from here we go. Perfect example, Konami. Need I say more?
Yeah.
You know, Konami. Even, you know, Square Enix. I mean,
Capcom.
You know, I mean, Square Enix.
Silicon Knights.
Silicon
they're
Knights.
long gone.
But like, you know, but Konami, they pretty much wrote themselves out of the gaming scene, and they're making a Castlevania and a Silent Hill pachinko game, and I'm like,
well, wait, I just want to interject there about the pachinko. They've actually been making those for a really long time.
Pachinko's not a big.
But what's especially egregious about the Castlevania pachinko game is that it is an erotic Castlevania pachinko.
Yeah.
I just want to point that I have no problem with them making these pachinko games. Sega does this. I mean,
every Japanese game developer has a pachinko game.
Yeah, that's
probably
very popular over there. But the fact that they're making Castlevania into a porno slot machine, fuck them.
To be fair,
the only thing I can say to that is, oh, Japan.
To be fair, most of the Japanese companies are pretty risque with their.
We're talking about a country that sells that have used panty vending machines.
Well, those are illegal over there, Brian.
Are they illegal now? I thought
they've been illegal since like 2005.
Okay,
yeah. I believe Japan made so the only thing you can sell are like consumables and like cell phones and some other electronic devices.
They do have beer vending machines over there.
Because sure, why not?
But
draft beer. Like,
but I want to kind of
beer
get into our future projects real quick, just like kind of a brief statement on them. So I'm just gonna kind of go. I'm just gonna have John kind of interject here, and I'm just gonna say the first we have coming out very soon, which is due out in probably about a month, is because we're still in the midst of finishing up production and doing testing and whatnot. It's called Rhapsody Clash. Chronicles of
Dark Lord Rhapsody Clash.
And that's gonna and that is a rhythm-based combat dueling type game. We'll have a more definitive, distinct naming convention for it in a little bit. But basically, it's going to be our first rhythm type game, and hopefully the start of its own IP. Actually, that'd be amazing. We'll see, how it gets received. I do have high hopes for that game. It features brand new art from Brandy. For most of the game is
quite a lot of it too.
Yeah, is Brandy's art, and it's also Carissa's art as well as being featured in that game. So that's our first stab at art in for one of our projects. So it's going to be really awesome. I'm looking forward to releasing that. It's going to hit more of our casual audience, which I'm looking forward to seeing how they view it, and maybe they'll get them to play our other games too. So we have that coming out in about a month, and then we also have, as John said earlier, is Shenandoah Zero Chronicle, which is our 8-bit RPG. Harkens back to the classic era. I should say 8-bit. I should more like as a mix of 8 and 16-bit.
So 12-bit.
So 12-bit, yeah. I keep saying 12-bit.
It's an 8-bit game. I don't know.
I was saying, you talking like Genesis? Are you talking like Genesis graphics? Not quite 16, not quite 8?
I was thinking more Turbo Graphics, but
the Turbo Graphics was at 16-bit.
It was, I know.
But more like
Game Boy Color.
Yeah, Game Boy Color.
Okay.
But it's gonna have
Neo Geo Pocket Color.
Yeah, but it's gonna have its own graphical style. It's gonna be a mix of that type of graphical.
We also have the expansion for Episode 2 coming out, which will add an 8th chapter to the game.
Yep, that's the Offspring DLC, which we actually announced on our Facebook. The expansion is going to be huge. It's going to be a lot of gameplay. I mean, we're looking. This is no simple DLC here, folks. It's going to be several hours. We're talking a lot of content for this. So, and
not as long as Chapter 7, but considerably longer than the first 6 chapters.
Yeah,
absolutely. So we have that coming. So we have the DLC for Episode 2, the Offspring. We have Zero Chronicle, which is a prequel to Episode 1, and I mean a distant prequel to Episode 1. That's
the origin of the world and everything.
It is the origin story. Yeah, so that's going to be a lot of fun. Now, as for other projects, I can obviously Episode 3 is in my mind. It's in John's mind. We're already starting a little bit of getting together conceptualize it and so forth. So Episode 3, we are starting to piece it together. So that's coming together. But honestly, before we even talk about Episode 3 or anything like that, then I do want to mention something that we have not announced, which is exclusive to the DLC podcast.
Hey, I'm getting an exclusive. This is nice.
Exclusive.
Very nice.
It's very nice.
So, and that's Tactics of a Dark Lord Origins. So, what is Tactics of a Dark Lord? It is our new tactical RPG IP. It is the first game, and there will be subsequent games because this is obviously the origins for it. This game basically takes place in between the period of after the prologue in Episode 1, after you beat Exides and you exile him to Seneferia, between then and between the time when you first take control of Magus as an adult. You're going to experience that story in between. So, hello.
Whoa.
So,
Hi, Facebook.
right. So all of that content you see during what I call the fire sequence, where you see all of that text that says what happens. Well, you're going to experience it.
That means we have to deal with puberty. That means we have to deal with whiny, angsty prick.
Well, he was already 18 in the beginning of the game.
Yes, that is true. But
You get to deal with Squall. Yes.
all of his dialogue is just going to be shrugs.
I will say this, and I'm not going to give away too much here, but I will say this.
Yeah, please don't.
You are not playing as Magus.
You are not the father.
So, that's all I'm going to say about that. You are not playing as Magus.
Interesting.
So it should be interesting. I'm looking for. Obviously, I have a huge love for tactical RPGs. Final Fantasy Tactics is one of the greatest games of all time, especially the PSP version. One of the greatest games of all time. I love tactical RPGs. Give me Shining Force. New Shining Force, Sega. Come on, let's get on the thing here.
That's going to be interesting.
That's Sega, Tanya.
So you got a tactical RPG coming out. You got Parappa the Rapper, the RPG. You've got Chronicles 3 in the conceptual phase.
We got the prequel.
Yeah. So you guys are getting very, very, very deep. Do you think you might be kind of overreaching a bit?
Actually,
The team has grown quite a lot.
yeah,
and
we have quite
do
a few people.
compartmentalize.
All right. So you got a support structure in place then?
Oh yeah, no, I'm not going to give an exact amount here, but we do have over 20 people on the team.
Alrighty.
So we're able to compartmentalize, as John said, and assign certain roles for certain projects. Now, I will mention one. John did mention Antocalius, a game about him earlier, which we haven't really talked about. But since he already mentioned it, I'm going to mention one more, actually, which is not an RPG at all. Actually, it's something very, very different. We're looking at a horror, a first-person horror game.
And the game is called And Now for Something Completely Different.
The game is called Black Wax. And basically, to give you an idea as to what it's going to be like, your protagonist, or I should say the person that you are playing as, is possessed by a demon. And through choices, and I don't just mean like choices like on screen. I mean literally everything you do within the environment has a consequence. Whether it's just picking up the phone, going into your refrigerator, whatever the choice may be, it has a consequence. And your object of the game obviously is to exercise yourself. It's easier said than done because, like I said, everything is choice based. Everything has a consequence. And it's obviously going to be a horror game, first person, all 3D, because there's no way we can tell the story in 2D. So it's going to be one of our first all 3D games. It's going to feature HD graphics, you name it, we're going to have it. It's going to be very high production.
And just so people know, this is all based off of a nightmare that Tanya had.
Yeah, this is a nightmare I had. And I jotted down. I immediately jotted down all the notes from my nightmare, and it turned into this. And I do promise everybody this within the sound of my voice. Once you play this game, you will have nightmares.
That almost sounds like a challenge because I do love me survival horror.
You will have a nightmare.
Don't think of it as survival horror. Don't think of it like that at all.
No, actually, this is going to be genre. This is actually going to be genre bending. Because this isn't a survival horror, but it also incorporates that too. So it's
Think of it more like D on the Saturn. Just, good.
All right. All right. So, I mean, obviously, all of these are, some of these are way down the pipeline. So,
I don't see Black Wax within the next.
Yeah, I mean, these are all ideas. I know that. I mean, obviously, I know Rhapsody Clash is coming. So.
Yeah, that's coming very soon. It should be out on Steam fairly soon. Once we're ready to release it, it'll be out also on other distributors like itch.io, Green Man Gaming, Gamersgate, so forth.
Cool. Well, I'm looking forward to it. So, Ron, do you have anything else, or?
Nah, that was it. That's about it.
Okay, so. So, if any of you out there on the wide world of the internet have any questions, comments, feedback for this episode or any other episode of Downloadable Content, once again, you can get a hold of us, facebook.com/dlcontent, Twitter @dlcontent, on Tumblr, dlcpodcast.tumblr.com. You can also email us, dlcpodcast. No, whatever. I got my plugs mixed up. Email is dlcontent1@gmail.com. See, I need to get my own site for this damn thing. But I don't know. The one thing I don't have in my tech-savvy repertoire is how to actually make a damn website.
Maybe I should get...
Nobody makes websites anymore. I used to do it back in the day, like HTML and all that crap, but everybody just uses generators now.
Yeah, everyone uses a generator now, so yes. dlcontent1@gmail.com is the email. So, there you go. That's all the different ways you can get in a hold of us. Every episode is on iTunes, YouTube, and Stitcher. So, Tanya, John, and Ryan, thank you very much for honoring our fans' request here to do an episode talking about Kisareth. It was a lot of fun.
That was a lot of fun. Thank you very much, Brian. I had a lot of fun.
So, Ron, have you been enlightened as well?
It's a little interesting to see the ins and outs of an indie studio. So it's a little... I enjoyed it. Thanks for having me come on.
Oh, yes. Well, you live here. It was just basically...
Kick the door open and say, "Hey, 5 minutes.
Yeah.
Chop.
Yeah, you practically live here. I mean...
Oh, I just want to give a quick shout out to Eternal Gamer 777. Thank you for your fan request. That was awesome, and I hope we answered your questions.
So, with that said, all that remains for me is to say have a good one, everybody.